Oh. Okay, so Alexander, let me try again. Alexander? Zolno?
Present.
Edwards? Farrell? Flores?
Present.
Miller? Rakos?
Here.
Zaney?
Here.
Vines?
Here.
Wilgos?
Here.
And Talon, yes. So we have 9 present and 2 absent. All right, with that, so we're on our second meeting for applications. We stopped last time at the Family and Friends of Northwest Indiana, so that's where we'll get started this meeting. A reminder for people at home that if we are deciding an amount for an organization at these early meetings, you do have to keep in mind that by the third meeting, we'll have a better understanding of the total that we've come to and how much money we have available, which this year is about $500,000. So there is a chance amounts could be decreased or increased depending on where we're at after the third day. So I just want to remind folks at home that not everything that we say here is final. So with that, we will start with Family and Friends of Northwest Indiana. They made a request for $20,000. The purpose of their funding is to add a homeless division center, it has added a homeless division center to its facility in Hammond, and it helps to get homeless people off the streets. They also use their funds to purchase food, gift cards, blankets, tents, pillows, and bedding, etc., to help folks that are in need. We had a question on it last time, so we held off on it. I think we have an update. Mr. Wilgus, if you want to update.
Mr. President, I had a chance to visit this organization, their facility, Friday of last week with Owana Miller, and was totally impressed with what they do. There actually were clients that were there when Owana and I walked in that they were helping with clothing and various other household items. I left there saying this is the kind of organization that services a lot of folks in Hammond, especially in some of these trying times, and I, without a doubt, would like to at least start out with 10,000, Mr. President.
We have a recommendation for 10,000. Is there any other discussion?
I agree.
We agree.
Okay, we will mark them down for 10,000. Thank you, Marty, for going above and beyond to get the information for us. Next, we have the Genesius Guild. They made a request this year for $7,500. The purpose of their funding is they would use this grant for technical upgrades for their facility. So they are located in a church off of Holman Avenue. They offer plays for the public, but with those plays, the folks that they have act in the plays are special needs and disabled people, among others. So with that, they're asking this year for money for technical upgrades, so it's a lot of equipment, things that'll help them put on better productions. Do we have a recommendation?
I recommend that we allocate $5,000 to them as we did last year with the possibility of revisiting.
So we have a recommendation for 5,000.
I agree.
We revisit at the end? Everybody's in agreement?
Yes.
Very good, 5,000 it is. Next, we have Girls on the Run. Last year, we gave them $7,500. This year, they made a request of $10,000. The purpose of their funding will go for scholarship assistance for Hammond participants through funding the cost of program implementation, including program curricula, supplies for 20 lessons, individual journals, and cinch bags, etc. They also have 5K entry, trained coaches, background checks, general liability. So it's really a hodgepodge of a lot of different items they need the money for. With that, do we have a recommendation?
I recommend $7,500 like we gave them last year.
We have a recommendation to match the grant from last year, $7,500. Any other discussion?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, $7,500 it is. Next, we have the Greater Deliverance COCIC American Health and Social Services. They're making a request for $20,000. In our work study session, it was requested that I retrieve some additional information before we make a recommendation for this group, so I have a little bit of homework. So we will go ahead and pass this one for now until I receive additional information to share with our group. Next, we have the Greater Hammond Community Services. Last year we gave them $20,000. This year they made a request for $30,000. A lot of us are very familiar with Greater Hammond. They've been around for a very long time and doing great things in the community. This specific purpose of the request, $20,000 be used for their lawn care program, which is what they use to help serve seniors and those that are disabled and not able to take care of their property or maintain their property on their own. They're also looking for funding for snow removal program for the same people. Do we have a recommendation from our group?
I recommend at this time $15,000 with the option to revisit.
So we have a recommendation for 15 and an option to revisit at the end.
I agree.
I agree.
Yes.
Agreement. Okay, we'll mark them down for 15,000. Thank you. Next, Habitat for Humanity. Last year they received $5,000 from this group. They made a request this year for $10,000. I think many folks are familiar with what Habitat for Humanity does. This year, they're looking at new home construction at 33 Webb Street. Do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President, I say we do 5,000 with a chance to look at it towards the end if we have extra money.
Recommendation for 5,000 and a revisit. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Agree.
Very good. Next, we have the Hammond Boxing Club. Last year, they did receive funding for us, although it didn't show on the sheet. This year, they're making a request of $30,000. This is another one where it was requested I would get additional information before we make a recommendation. So for now, we'll put it to the side until I retrieve more information. Next, we have the Hammond Central softball team. They are making a request for $5,000. This is obviously a program that's run through Hammond Central. This will be used to build their program, and they specifically talk about field time for the program as well. And just for the people at home, we get quite a few sports groups, and so we typically try and be fair to all the groups and do a similar amount. In this case, they're requesting $5,000. Do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I recommend that we allocate the full 5,000.
We have a recommendation for 5,000. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, 5,000 it is. Thank you. Hammond Community Theater, last year we gave them a grant of $4,200. This year they made a request for $5,000. I believe somebody said earlier, we looked at the address, this is also can be known as the Beatniks on Conkey
Right.
group. So I think a lot of us are very familiar with what they do, performances for the community. Do we have a recommendation for this group?
Yes, I recommend the full 5,000 they requested.
We have a recommendation for 5,000. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, we will mark it down for 5,000. Hammond Community Watch, last year we gave an amount of 15,000. This year we have a request of 25,000. Councilwoman Venez will recuse herself from recommending any amounts or voting on any amount, being that she is the president of the organization. The purpose of the funding is for a light program. It's a security light program. They used to be run by the Hammond Urban Enterprise Association. They were no longer capable of running it, and so the Hammond Community Watch Group has taken that program over. With that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
I recommend the $25,000. This is a great program. It allows homeowners in Hammond to light up their garage area, their backyard, to keep crime down. So I think it's a very wonderful and well worth program. And I also know that there's also a waiting list.
So we have a recommendation for 25,000. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we will mark them for 25,000, and I echo your statements. Ms. Flores. Okay, next we have the Hammond Education Foundation. I believe, okay, let me start with that last year they received a $10,000 grant from us. This year, they're requesting $20,000. This is another one that, in review in our work study session, we talked about with the amount that they're requesting and the purposes of the funding, that we want to hold it to the end to see where we're at, and then we're going to make a recommendation as far as what we think we can do for them. So we will put that to the side for now, and we will come back to that at the end. We have the Hammond Hermits Athletic Association. Last year, they received a grant of $10,000. This year, they requested $17,000. I think most of us are very familiar with their baseball program that they offer. And I believe earlier we did a $10,000 grant for another youth sports association. So with that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman
I
Vines.
recommend that we remain consistent and grant them $10,000.
Recommendation for $10,000. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, very good. 10,000 it is. Hammond Hispanic Community Committee, last year we gave them a grant of $2,500. This year they're asking for $3,000. Purpose of the funding is assistance for their big annual event that hosts over 500 community families and their children. It'll help fund some of the security and amenities for the event, including food and direct services as fingerprinting kits for kids, and some of the signage and booklets, etc. With that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
I recommend, oops, go ahead.
Then they get the full 3,000 they're asking for.
Recommendation for 3,000, are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we will mark them down for 3,000. Hammond, Indiana Hurricanes, last year we gave a grant of $1,000. This year they have requested for $15,000. Many of us are familiar with this program. It's been around a very long time. Willie White obviously has done a great job over the years with the basketball program. They're not just in Indiana, but they actually go throughout the country for different tournaments. And it's not just about basketball. It's about, as he puts it, self-initiatives that they teach the kids that are part of the program. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend $10,000.
Recommendation for 10,000. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, very good. We'll mark them for 10,000. Next, we have the Hammond Mohawks ACC. I'll differentiate that since there's two different names, even though we're doing two on Hammond Mohawks. Last year, it doesn't show an amount, but I think we did actually give them an amount. But this year, it states that the $10,000 requested is for their Memorial Day Parade, which not only are some of us familiar with, but we also attend on an annual basis. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I'd like to recommend we give them $8,000.
8,000, I think that's what we did last year. I think
Yes.
that's what we
Yes.
came up in work study. So we have a recommendation for 8,000. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
So we will approve 8,000 for them. And then their second application is a request of 3,000. And this is part of the annual Adopt a Sailor Program 2023 Thanksgiving Dinner, where they provide bus transportation for approximately 40 to 45 U.S. Navy servicemen and women to and from the Great Lakes Naval Training Center to our facilities for this dinner. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I'll make a recommendation that we fund $3,000.
So we have a recommendation for the full 3,000. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Hammond Optimist Youth Sports. Last year, we gave a grant of $10,000. This year, they're asking for $20,000. The purpose of the funding is for scoreboard and maintenance. And they list that as $28,000, so I'm assuming they have some other funds. It also states these funds will help preserve the Hammond Optimist Youth Sports Facility, providing the residents of Hammond and visiting people a chance to experience one of the top facilities for baseball, softball that Hammond has to offer. With that, do we have a recommendation?
I recommend the 10,000 that we keep it consistent with the other youth leagues.
Recommendation of 10,000. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
We will mark them down for 10,000. Next is the Hammond Public Library Foundation.
Mr. President, I have to recuse myself. I'm the president of the Hammond Public Library, although this is the foundation is directly related to the library board.
This is the beginning of several recusing. Mr. Wielgus, he's involved with several of these organizations. They are asking for $1,999, and the purpose of the funding is they're looking for a laptop computer for their youth department at the library. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I would suggest that we grant them the entire $1,999.
Recommendation for the full amount, are we all in agreement?
Yes.
We are, thank you. Next is Hammond Reads. They received $10,000 from us last year. They're asking for the same amount this year. Purpose of the funding is for book distribution. These includes books purchased for children's books to be distributed to families at the Hammond WIC office, books donated for special events in Hammond, and books requested by other organizations. It's also a dictionary project, miscellaneous expenses, and they also have an annual essay contest that people are familiar with. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Vines.
I recommend that we give them the $10,000.
We have a recommendation for $10,000. Any further discussion on this one? So everybody's in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. There you go. Hammond Teachers Federation, they are requesting an amount of $10,725.54. The primary service that Hammond Teachers Federation offers are engaging the community with issues that involve providing quality education for our students, holding administrators accountable to the community by voicing educational concerns, providing solutions to problems in our district to help our students achieve more on a daily basis, encouraging continued education by providing scholarships to graduating seniors, etc. With that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President, I think that with the very limited amounts of money that we have, $500,000 that we have to give out this year, as you had indicated prior to the start, I think that trying to give money to any type of union, federation, or anything like that means that we're taking money away from other organizations that may be supplying food or services within the community, as we've already identified several of those already tonight. So my recommendation is that we give zero amount.
So we have a recommendation to pass on a grant for this application. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, we'll pass on that. Mr. Wilgus. Next is the First Tee Lake County. I don't believe they applied last year. However, this year they made a application request of $25,000. I have to recuse myself from voting or participating in any amount whatsoever because I did recently join the board for First Tee. The purpose of the funding for the organization is part of a larger fundraising effort to help upgrade and improve the facilities and equipment. In many of the cases for the First Tee program, the equipment has been donated by a third party, which not always is in the best of shape. Their flight monitor TrackMan was purchased by one of our employees so that they'd be able to have the proper equipment to teach during the months that they had less than ideal weather conditions. So the employees actually donated money as well. With that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President, I would recommend $10,000 as we did with the other sports-oriented groups.
So we have a recommendation for $10,000 like we did for the other youth groups. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, very good, 10,000. Next is Haven House. Last year, they received a grant of $17,850. This year, they're asking for $37,132.51. For the purpose of funding, I think a lot of people are familiar with Haven House, but it is a shelter for families that have been affected by domestic violence. So I think most people understand the program already. With that, do we have a recommendation for this grant?
Mr. President, I'd recommend that we do $15,000 and revisit it towards the end.
We have a recommendation for $15,000 and to revisit if there's additional funding. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Health Visions Midwest. I believe this is their first time applying for funds. They asked for $19,500. The purpose of their funding is to expand their Trusted Neighborhood Transportation Program. They provide much-needed relief for senior citizens, veterans, individuals with disabilities experiencing transportation barriers, or if they have auto repairs, rising gas prices, or declining health resulting in no longer being able to drive safely, then they would step up. With that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Vines.
I recommend that we pass on this application due to duplication of services.
So we did talk about that a lot, just for the people that were not involved with the first meeting, that if there are other organizations that offer similar services that are pretty well-known and popular at this time, sometimes we will pass on duplication of services. Obviously, we know the North Township Trustee's Office does a lot of the similar activities that they're offering here. We have a recommendation for a pass. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
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 They are, okay. Thank you. Next, we have the Hessville Commerce and Community Creative, also known as the HC3.
Mr. President, unfortunately, I'm going to have to recuse myself. I'm the president of this board.
No kidding.
Mr. President,
Councilman Rakos.
I'm also on the board, although I'm not president. But
So we have two of our members are recusing themselves. Last year, we gave $15,000, and just for folks at home, we do try and match for like organizations that are asking for money. So we keep that in mind when we do make a recommendation. I think a lot of people are familiar with the HC3, but it is a Hessville community organization group that has many different activities in that area. This specific purpose would be for building maintenance and repair of their facility, which is the old Hanson Community Center, or I'm sorry, what they're calling the Hanson Community Center. It's also money for St. Patrick's Day, Christmas, Mexican Independence Day parades, and cleanup of Kennedy Avenue. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I'd like to recommend we give them the 20,000.
We have a recommendation for $20,000. Is everybody in, besides Councilman Rakos and Marty Wilgus, is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Next is Hessville Little League. They did not receive last year, or they might have, but I don't have it listed here. But they are making a recommendation, or I'm sorry, they did. They received a grant of $10,000 last year. Excuse me. And this year, they're requesting a grant of $20,000. We're all very familiar with the Hessville Little League, just as we are the Hammond Hermits. We try and stay consistent with youth organizations. So I will ask, do we have a recommendation for this group?
Mr. President, I recommend the 10,000 that we've been given to the youth organizations.
So we have a recommendation for $10,000, as we've done for the other groups. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Next is the Homestead Enterprise Housing, Inc. They received a grant of $5,000 last year. They're requesting the same amount this year. The purpose of the funding is to continue to provide and serve Golden Manor senior community and our community at large with social, educational, and recreational activities that promote involvement, unity, fellowship, and compassion.
Mr. President, I have to recuse myself.
We will recuse Marty Wilgus from this,
I also have to recuse myself because I'm on the board.
and we will recuse Sharon Zaney. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Vines.
I recommend that we grant $5,000.
We have a recommendation for $5,000, so the full grant amount. Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Very good. Hope Center of Northwest Indiana. Last year, they received a grant of $5,000. This year, they're requesting $17,365. Purpose of the funding is they are planning a summer enrichment camp for elementary school students in grades K through 3 to help remediate and get them caught up to where they need to be academically. They also incorporate STEM activities and outdoor adventures to make the experience fun and rewarding. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Councilman
I
Rakos.
recommend a $5,000 and revisit at the end to see if it could be revised out. It's a good organization I'm well aware of. They do a lot of good things.
Very good. Recommendation for 5,000 with a revisit checked on the end. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Very good. Humane Indiana, last year they received a grant of $5,000. This year they made a request of $10,000. This is the Humane Society group that we're all familiar with. And I do want to make it known that our Hammond Animal Shelter works very closely with them when we have situations where we need assistance. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I recommend that we keep it the same as last year for the 5,000.
Recommendation for 5,000. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Intermission Inc., I believe this is a new application. They have made a grant request for $5,000. The purpose of their funding is for their Thrive program. And it talks about overhead, childcare, food, decorations, venue, trophies, gift cards, graduation incentives. It's a 6-month program designed to help lead individuals from surviving to thriving. That is their mission at Intermission. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I would suggest that we award them the entire 5,000 they've requested.
We have a recommendation for a full grant award of $5,000. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Very good. Impact received $15,000 last year. This year, they made a grant request of $20,000. Their purpose of their funding is they are currently waiting a bid to replace the dilapidated fence at 6341 Forest Avenue. The existing fence has deteriorated and needs to be removed. A new fence would be installed in its place. Grant money received will be used to cover the fees associated with labor, removal, and installation of a new fence. And the remainder of grant money will help to purchase furniture for the residents.
So, Mr. President, I also have to recuse myself.
Okay, Marty is recused from this one. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Flores.
I recommend that we do 10,000 with the possibility to revisit towards the end.
We have a recommendation of 10,000 with a revisit asterisk on the side of it. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Very good. Next, we have the Jalen L. Hunter Foundation. This is a relatively new organization. As we learned during work study, they made a grant request of $10,000. They would like to, the purpose of the funding is that they like to be able to hold more support groups. They like to continue to offer gifts at Christmas for the families. Also hosting another pre-Mother's Day brunch this year, and as I understand it, this is for families that have lost either children or family members, just so we're being clear. And they also will be continuing annually, but like to open up to more mothers in the future. Hosting the second annual benefit dinner on October 13th, 2023, and also a back-to-school event, and hosting a student with membership to the Boys and Girls Club, et cetera. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I recommend 5,000 at this time with the possibility to revisit based on what they've stated in their documents.
We have a recommendation for 5,000 with a revisit. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Very good. Next is the Lake County Fire Chiefs Association. They made a request of $10,000. In our work study session, it was requested that we receive additional information on their grant request. So with that, we will put it to the side for now. I will gather some information, and we will revisit that at the third meeting. Next is Mental Health America of Northwest Indiana. They made a request, they received a grant last year of $15,000. This year, they made a request of $45,000. I am no longer on the board as I was last year, so I don't have to recuse myself for this organization. Some people remember this group as Parents as Teachers. They've been around a long time, but they merged, which is why it's now called Mental Health America. They're in downtown Hammond on Holman Avenue. The purpose of their program is their organizations, they offer lots of different programs and services for families that are in need in Hammond, or at least specifically any money that we grant would go towards Hammond families. They're very well aware of that. So with that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President, I'd recommend that we do 20,000 and revisit it as we get towards the end.
We have a recommendation of 20,000 with a revisit. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Montessori Children's Schoolhouse, last year we did a grant of 10,000. This year they had a grant request of $40,000. The purpose of their funding is specifically for building repair and restoration. They talk about window repair, and scraping, priming, painting of their windows. So I guess these are their original wooden window frames, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. With that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President, I would recommend that we award them 10,000 as we did last year.
We have a recommendation to match the grant we did last year, which was 10,000. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Very good. Next is Mount Zion Drive, A.R. Burns Pleasant View Plaza. Last year, we did a grant of $7,300. This year, they requested $9,875. The purpose of their funding is in very small handwriting, so I'm just going to go off the cuff here, that they provide trips for folks that are at the facility. These are things that help Hammond people. I know last year we had a question on one of their trips and one of their events that was for people outside of Hammond, and because these are Hammond dollars, we try and focus mainly on Hammond items. It does talk about a springtime festival, Mother's Day lunch, Father's Day lunch, arts and crafts event, and a Christmas party. So with that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President, I'd like to recommend we give them the $9,875.
We have a recommendation to approve the full amount of $9,875. Is everyone in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, our last application for today's session is the New Hope Baptist Church College Day. Last year, we gave them a grant of $2,000. This year, they're requesting the same amount, and the purpose of the funding is care packages for students, public relations, and some miscellaneous other items. With that, do we have a recommendation from the group?
Mr. President, I would suggest the full 2,000 that they've requested.
We have a recommendation for the full $2,000 grant request. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. All right, that will finalize the grants that we're going to review today. We will focus on the remainder of the grants at our final meeting, which we have switched the date on. Does anybody have that off the top of their head?
April 13th?
April 13th. Okay, very good. So for the people at home, it will be, the last date should be on April 13th. According to our numbers, I didn't add it up myself, so I want to be careful, but I think we're right around the $364,000 range to date. So we have just under $150,000 for the remaining applications that we have. So with that, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
And do we have, and we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, motion